Well, Jennifer, why don't we go ahead and start?
Okay, that sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Smith, and I'm an immigration attorney in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And I'm going to start by walking through the USCIS forms for applying for DACA. And just to back up one second, USCIS are the initials for the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. Some people refer to them as UCIS. They are where you will file any application for an initial or renewal DACA application, and they will be the ones deciding the case. So what I've done is, you should be able to see this on our shared screen, is the first form that I have up is the USCIS form. If you can look in, I believe it's like the top, hold on, I've got too many things open on my screen here. I'm sorry, one second. So in the top right-hand corner, you will see the different form numbers.
Okay.
So the first form that I have up on my screen, it says consideration of deferred action for childhood arrivals. And in the top right-hand corner, you'll see it says form I-821D. So this is the form for DACA. And in order to help people review your forms with you, I think it's great to take a first stab at these forms and get really familiar with the information you need to put on them. The more you can draft this in advance of meeting with an attorney to review your form, the more efficient you can be, and the easier it is to spot anything that's missing or any mistakes or anything like that. So we're going to drop down on the form to where it says the word start here. I'm just highlighting that so you can kind of see where I am. And it's part 1, information about you for initial or renewal requests. So assuming most people are here because they want to do a first time initial DACA application, I'm going to focus on that. But it's pretty straightforward if you're doing a renewal as well. So for the initial request people, you're going to check box 1 and say this is an initial request. If you're not an initial request and you're renewing, you would check box 2 and you would put the date in down here of when your current work permit expires. Because if you're filing for an initial, you're not going to have that date. You can just leave. We can leave a date off of that box. You will, however, want to make sure you put in your full name. You start with your last name or your family name, your full name. So if your last name has 2 parts, you want to put both names in there. For given name, you want to put your first name, and then middle name, you want to include that as well. You want to give all full, complete names. The next area down on the form is your U.S. mailing address. Now, your mailing address may be different for some people than where you physically live. And so that could be a post office box, or maybe it's really most secure if you get your mail somewhere other than where you're currently living. You want to put in here your mailing address. If the location of where you want your mail to go is at a location where somebody else lives, so let's say it's like your aunt's house. The first line where it says in care of, you want to put your aunt's name and then her address. If it's a PO box, a post office box, and you don't hold the post office box, if it's not in your name, again, you're going to want to put the name of the person who has that post office box. Because sometimes the Postal Service won't deliver it if your name isn't on the postal box. So that's an important step I want to make sure you add if your mailing address is different from your home address. And then we'll go over here to this column for removal proceedings and information. You can apply for DACA if you've been in immigration court in the past, if you've been in what we call removal proceedings, or even if you've been ordered deported in the past. If that applies to you, I would say that doing this process on your own without retaining an attorney to represent you is probably not the best choice. But I want to explain what that is, assuming that we're helping people that have never been in removal proceedings. For this question number 5, you're going to select the box, no, I've never been in proceedings, it doesn't apply to me. which means these questions down here, 5A through 5G, don't apply to you either. You can just keep going on the form. In the second page of this form, we're going to start with question number 6. Question number 6 asks for your alien registration number. If you have never applied for any type of immigration benefit or for DACA in the past, you're not going to have an A number, as it's called. There's nothing to put in here. The same goes for a social security number. You won't have anything to put in here. So these two may not apply to you, and that's fine. Pregunta 8, in question 8, date of birth. Everyone's going to have a date of birth. You're going to put your date of birth here. Next one is gender. Now these forms only have binary choices for gender. So you're going to pick the one that applies to you best. And if neither one really applies to you, feel free to handwrite on the form what you prefer. I just would make sure that you pick one of the boxes just so the box is checked. But you could handwrite a notation on there if that was more appropriate in your situation.
Excuse me, Jennifer, someone just asked the question, what's the A number again?
Okay, so the A number, and was the question in Spanish or English?
English.
Okay, the A number or alien registration number is the number given to you by U.S. Immigration Services. It will only be given to you once you've applied for some type of benefit or for DACA. So for most people, if this is your first time applying for DACA, you will not have a number to put here, and it should be blank. Or if you don't feel comfortable leaving something blank, what we recommend is that you put N/A. Not applicable is what that means. Okay. For questions 10 through 12, this is the city or town where you were born, the country where you were born, your current country of residence. This is question number 11. Now, I fill this out as the United States. All of you are going to be living in the United States if you're filling out this application, because you can only apply for it if you live in the United States. So you can put that your current country of residence is the United States. I've never had a problem with that. Question number 12 is your country of citizenship. So number 10 and number 12, 10B, I should say, question 10B and question 12 should probably be the same country. Now, there are some people who have been born in one country and have citizenship in a different country, in which case those answers will be different. But for the majority of you, those will be the same. So en preguntas 10 hasta 12 pone información sobre el lugar de nacimiento, su país de nacimiento y su país de ciudadanía. Y en el pregunta 11, su país de residencia es ok para poner Estados Unidos. Pregunta 13, para su estatus marital, escoge categoría para usted. So for number 13, your marital status, you're going to pick the one that applies to you. If you're married, say married. If you're single, say single. If you are holding yourself out as married in other places and want to be common law married, then the answer is married. Okay, question 14A through 14C, other names. If you've used other names, let's say now you're married and have a married name that you put on page 1. Page 2, you're going to put like your maiden name, the name you had before you got married, if it changed. If you've ever had a name change, or you've just used other names for other formal documents for school or work or something else, you're going to want to put the name there. So now we're in part 2, where it says residence and travel information. In order to qualify for DACA, in this question, you have to be able to honestly answer yes, that you've been continuously residing in the US from June 15th, 2007 up till the present time. That's what we just talked about with Claudia's question. So for every DACA application that I can think of, this is most going to be yes for everyone who's eligible. If you can't answer yes to this question, then you probably don't qualify for DACA. All right, so you'll see down here there's instructions about if this is an initial request, what we're going to need to put on the form on the next page, and if you're a renewal request, what you need to put on the form. So we're going to go to that page now, and we're going to look at addresses. So if this is your initial request for DACA, you have to put every address in the United States from your date of entry until now. So a good idea before you start filling out this form is to sit down and write down every place you've ever lived. And if you don't remember, talk to your mom, talk to your aunts, talk to your family, look for bills, do everything you can so you can record every address and the month and year you've lived at those addresses. And that's everything on this side. Okay, and now we jump over here. So now at this point on an initial request, we have to list, every time you've left the United States after June 15, 2007, no matter how long or short it is. The length of that trip may determine whether you're eligible for DACA or not, but we still have to put them all. If you've had none, then you would have nothing to put here. If you have trips, you're going to list them and explain why you were gone. Like, let's say maybe you came to the US as a kid and then at some point you had to go back for a funeral or a wedding or something for like a week and then you came back again. That's probably just fine. So you'll need to put down, if for example, you're from Mexico and you have a Mexican passport, you're going to want to put down Mexico here and the number of that passport and when it expires. If you ever had a border crossing card at any time in your life, even if it's expired, you'll want to put the border crossing card number here. If you don't have those things, you don't need to put anything down. Okay, so part 3 down here. The first question again is confirming your eligibility for DACA. It wants to verify that you entered the US before you turned 16. So for anyone applying for DACA initial applications, you need to be able to check yes to this box. If you can't check yes to the box, then you don't qualify at this time. Okay. The second question here is the date of your initial entry to the United States. So in my example that I gave before, if you came to the US in 2005 and you stayed and then left briefly in 2008, the date you're going to put here is the 2005 date of when you entered. So number 3 is asking the place of initial entry to the US. If you want to say as close as you remember or whatever you've been told, if you don't know the exact date, the day, the month, the year, you want to put as much information as you can. So, if you know, well, I know it was June of 2005, then you're going to put June of 2005. If you know it was summer of 2005, then you'll put summer of 2005. This question is asking, what was your status on June 15th, 2012? Well, you had to be in the US on that date. That's one of the requirements. And you could say no lawful status. You could say that I had status, but it expired, or some other status. The most common answer here is no status on that date. This question is asking if you ever received a permit when you entered the United States, referred to as an I-94. If you didn't enter with legal status at the time of your entry to the United States, then the answer to this question is going to be no. Okay. 5B asks if you did get a permit when you entered, you need to put the number there if you have it. If you don't have it, you can say, I don't know what it is, I lost it, whatever. Okay. These questions down here, 6, 7, and 8 are about your education. Again, these are part of the requirements for DACA. So you'll need to be able to fill something in here as part of meeting the requirements for DACA. Question 6 is about whether you're you basically are saying in question 6, whether you're still in school, currently in school, or if you graduated from high school, or if you graduated from a GED program or something similar. Question 7 is saying, okay, if you're in school or you graduated from school, we want to know where you went to school, where it was located. Question 8 is the date of graduation or the last date you attended that school. Okay, next part, military service. If you are a member of the US military, you would put yes here and you would fill in the appropriate information. This part is for both renewal and initial DACA applications. These are questions about any criminal history. This is one of those areas where if you think you may have issues, we're going to recommend that you hire an attorney, because we want to make sure that we don't put you at risk in the application, or that if you are at any risk, you know what those risks are before you submit it. This one is a pretty broad question. It wants to know if you've ever in all of your life ever been arrested, charged with, or convicted of any type of incident. The only things that don't apply here are minor traffic violations. And even those can count if they involved alcohol or drugs. Again, if you do have any of these things and need to say yes, it doesn't mean you're automatically disqualified. It just means you may need to talk to an attorney, and you're going to need to collect all the certified records from court and police in order to complete the application. This is asking for any arrests or charges outside of the U.S. Now I can't remember what I've said in English and what I've said in Spanish. If you do have something outside the U.S., you need to include the records again. And again, you're going to want to talk to an attorney to make sure you're still eligible for DACA, even with that history. This question is asking if you've ever engaged in or plan to engage in terrorist activities. I will say that if you answer yes to this question, you probably don't qualify for DACA. Question 4 is asking if you are now or have ever been in the past a member of a gang. Again, that would be something to talk to an attorney about if you think you need to say yes. So these questions in 5 are basically asking if you've ever really been involved in killing, torturing, or hurting other people. So question 6 is asking if you've ever encouraged someone under the age of 15 to serve in armed combat. Question 7 is asking kind of the same thing. Okay. I'm counting on Cynthia to step in when I screw this up. Okay. This part right here is where you will say whether you can read and understand English on your own, or whether you had to use an interpreter to understand this form. The interpreter is not the same as someone who prepares it necessarily. An interpreter is just someone who interprets the words on the form. They don't tell you how to answer the questions. Okay. En esta parte aquí es la firma de requester. This is where you sign. You, the person applying for DACA, sign here. You're the requester. And when you sign this form, you're saying that everything on the form is true. You're signing under penalty of perjury, meaning you swear and that everything's accurate. And here's where you can put your phone number and your email address. This is a little bit additional stuff the interpreter needs to fill out before they can sign and date the form. Number 7, the rest of this form is all if you had someone help you prepare it. So, okay. So that first form that we just went over is the application for DACA. The second form is the application for the work permit. Okay. So you have to have both. The government has to approve your DACA application in order to give you a work permit. If they deny your application for DACA, they will deny the application for the work permit at the same time. Okay. In this form, we're going to go down here, your reasons for applying. If this is your first time applying for DACA, you're going to check box 1A, an initial permission to accept employment. If you were renewing DACA for some reason, you would choose 1C, that it's a renewal of a work permit that you already have. On part 2 here, again, you're listing your U.S. mailing address. This should be the same address on both forms for where you get your mail. So on question 6, they're asking you, is where you get your mail the same place you live? If it's the same, you're going to check yes, and then you get to skip to question number 8. But if you pick no, then you have to put your other address, your physical address, if it's different from your mailing address. Okay. Question number 8 is asking for the A number again. Again, since we're talking about initial DACA applications, you're not going to have an A number. If you're renewing, you will have an A number, and you can put that in there. Number 9 is about whether you have an online USCIS account number. So this is something they've started more recently, where you can create an account on the USCIS website for your application. This can be really handy if you want to get constant updates on your case. It's not entirely accurate, but it can be. And if you've created such an account, you would put the number there. If you don't have one, it's fine. Number 10 is gender, marital status. Number 10 and 11, we've talked about those, fill them in. This question is asking if you've ever filed a form I-765 for a work permit in the past. Usually this is a no, especially if this is your first time DACA. If you're renewing, then the answer is yes. Question 13, has the Social Security Administration ever given you a Social Security card? Again, if you've never applied for anything in the past, the answer to this is going to be no. If you have DACA in the past or something else, this will be a yes, and then you'll want to put the number down here in los espacios. Okay. Up here, if, for example, you already have a Social Security card, then you're going to put no for questions 14 and 15 and skip to question 18. So in these questions for your initial DACA application, you're going to put yes, you want Social Security to send you a card, and yes, you give them permission, USCIS, permission to share this information with Social Security so they can automatically send you that new card once they approve your case. That's been really helpful in streamlining things, and so that's how we encourage you to do that. If you consent for Social Security to share that for Social Security to get that information, you do have to fill in your father's birth name and your mother's birth name. So that's your mother's maiden name before she got married. And here you're going to put whatever country you're from, wherever you were born and wherever you have citizenship. Okay. In this part here, part 2, place of birth, you're going to put the city, town you were born in, the state you were born in, the country you were born in, and the date of your birth. Here, they're going to ask about information about your last arrival in the U.S. If you entered with permission and you have a permit, you're going to put that I-94 number here. If you didn't enter with permission, you're going to leave this blank or put N/A, not applicable. In question 21, you're putting information about your current passport. Question 22, you're going to put the date of your last arrival in the U.S. So in my example earlier where someone came in 2005 but left a little bit in 2008 and then came back in 2008, this date here is going to be a 2008 date. Question 23 is where you crossed the border, which we talked about on the other form. And this is the status at your last entry. So if you entered as a tourist, that's a B2. If you entered with no status, the answer is no status. Question 25 is asking what your current status is. So right now, in this moment, not at the time you entered, but right now, what status do you have in the US? The majority of you are going to have no status. But if for some reason you did have status right now, you'd want to put that. If you have lawful status in the US, though, we want to talk about why you're applying for DACA, because you probably don't need DACA if you have lawful status. Okay. Question 26 is if you were ever had a student or exchange visitor visa, you would put a number here. So this is they're asking for what category of in which category are you eligible to work in the US? And under DACA, that category is C33. So you would put a C in the first box, 33 in the second box, and nothing in the third box. So at this point, none of the rest of this applies to you. You're going to skip to part 3. And then this section is just like the other form. You're going to say whether you understand English, whether you used an interpreter, and whether you used a preparer. The person who prepares it and the person who interprets it aren't necessarily usually the same one. And in fact, I would recommend that they not be. You should have your attorney be the preparer and your interpreter should be somebody else, just to make sure you're getting accurate information. Questions 3, 4, 5 are about your phone number and email. Question 6 doesn't apply. You skip that. You're going to go down to where you sign. So in this part, you're the applicant and you're going to sign and date the form. The next part of the form is filled out by the interpreter, and the last part of the form is filled out by whoever prepared it. It's one page. Una página. Oh no. It's your name, it's your income information, and it's a short space to write why you want a work permit under DACA. The numbers don't change your eligibility for DACA. You just need to fill them in. And in here, you want to put a short, nice statement about why you want to be able to get a work permit, what it means to you to have a work permit and be able to save money for college or support your family or pursue your career. Short though, doesn't need to be long, like 5-6 sentences. At this point, I'll do a quick summary of the requirements for DACA. And I'm going to go over what you need for an initial DACA because that's what I want us to focus on here. So you must be, as we kind of touched on a little bit, the key thing is you've got to be able to prove that you entered the US before June 15th, 2007, and that you've stayed in the US since then till now. That means that you need to provide evidence showing that. I prefer that you gather something for every month of every year you've been in the United States. That's like the best case scenario. So, that's like school records, medical records, dental records, rent receipts, photos with dates on them, social media posts with dates. So a lot of times people don't have evidence from when they first came into the US because they were really, really young. And so in that case, we try to use evidence from their parents. So we're using employment records, we're using medical records for them, we're using rent receipts, any other stuff to show that you were living in the US with your parents. The more evidence you have, the better. Don't leave something out. If you think you have too much, you can't have too much. So, you just want to look for anything and everything you can find. The good news is that one of the other requirements for DACA is you have to prove that you came in before 16. And usually this is the same evidence will meet both requirements. And another type of evidence is immunization records. Those can be really helpful because usually you had to have those to go to school. Another requirement is that you have to prove that you were in the US on June 12th, June 15th, 2012. So you have to be able to prove you were here on June 15th, 2012. That's tough a lot of times because there's no school usually. If you went to summer school, then you can use summer school records, or if you went to summer camp, or if you worked or you had a bank account, or you played sports, sometimes those were in the summer. You have to get really creative again to kind of come up with anything you can think of from the summer, maybe pictures from your birthday party that show like, hey, I was 6 in that year or whatever. Look for anything and everything you can find that on paper that would show that you were in the US on that date. If you really, really, really can't find anything, the last ditch effort is to try to use affidavits. The other thing you have to have is you have to have proof that you're going to school or that you graduated from school. Different types of evidence can show you're in school, your class schedule, your grades. You definitely want to copy your diploma if you graduated, or your GED if you have that. If you're enrolled in a GED program, you need to show proof that you're enrolled in that program. You won't have necessarily a class scheduled for that, but you will have other evidence like payments and online documents and records showing that you're enrolled in an accredited GED program. The other thing I like people to include that you need a photo ID of some kind to include. So that could be your current passport if you have one. It could be a driver's license if you have one. It could be your school ID if you have one of those. Those are the 3 easiest ones to use. So you want to make sure you have those photos. And of course, you need to make sure you include payment for the filing fees. Right now, that is $495 for all the applications together, and you can submit them on separate checks or on one check. There's some extras you can include because DACA is a discretionary application. That means that even if you meet the minimum requirements, the government could still say no if they wanted to. So it's really a nice idea to tell them why it's a good, why you deserve DACA, send in some letters from your teachers or your employers or anyone else who can really talk about what a great value you add to your community. So if for some reason you have a criminal history or a traffic citation history, you would need to get some certified records to include in your DACA application for that as well. The other thing I like to tell people that I really want you to, if you're going to do this on your own, which I'm hoping you guys are going to do this, you prepare an organized packet, and that you put an index, a list of everything that you've got that you're sending to the government on the front of it, and that you make a complete copy, one complete copy of every single thing you're sending to the government before you put it in the envelope. And thank you everyone for your really good questions. Please feel free to reach out if you have more. We'll be able to get those answered. Yeah.
And yeah, good night, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good night.